Eric is one of the best chefs in New York City, and his restaurant Le Bourdain is there's none better than Le Bourdain. He began he spent almost his whole life in 3-star restaurants and carried on throughout, which is a remarkable thing. The second chef is Anthony Bourdain, who has become something of a monster celebrity of our times. He spent 28 years working really hard at cooking. Unbelievably, he also managed to teach himself how to write and to write really well. I'm amazed by the caliber of his work and his writing. So he's a talented writer, and he's also a terrific cook, and he ran a great restaurant, and now he runs around the country and the globe. Lastly is Gabrielle Hamilton, another extraordinary story. She worked in nothing restaurants for 22 years and then decided to open up a restaurant that has become probably one of the chef's favorite restaurants to go. When chefs go out, Prune is the restaurant that they like to go to. It's an extraordinary accomplishment, and I'm really honored to be here. So we will begin. I told the audience that I wanted something that interests me is learning the fundamentals of cooking. Learning cooking for a restaurant is it's not like putting together a dinner party. There are rules of time and heat and speed that don't apply to other people. I was astounded by all the chefs that I met when I first started writing about this subject, whose eyes were brown, and I finally realized that they were caramelized from spending all that time in the heat. And then I began to understand why they were a little whacked. It made sense. So what interests me and what I'd like to talk about is what are the fundamental techniques, what are the fundamental lessons that a young cook learns in order to succeed for the rest of his life or her life at the level that you guys have. And perhaps address also how you all have become so articulate about the work you do. Gabrielle is an extraordinary writer. She's probably the best working chef writer that I have read. Eric, you are fluent in 3 languages and every bit as articulate in English as you are in French. And Tony, your books speak for themselves, for better or worse. Eric, you began, some of your formidable experiences happened at Jamin under Chef Joe Robuchon. He was not a daisy in the kitchen, I hear.
He was a tough chef. Just before Robuchon, I was in La Tour d'Argent, which was a very classic restaurant in Paris, where the discipline was very old-fashioned, let's say. And we were not only verbally abused, but physically abused. And basically, you will recognize the sous chefs from the line cooks at the shoulders. The ones with the blue shoulders were the line cooks, because they were beating us in the shoulders. And
You're
then,
not kidding either.
No, I'm serious. It's true. I mean, it makes me laugh now, but I was running fast. And then from there, I went to Robuchon. Mm-hmm. And Robuchon was extremely demanding and a very, you said temperamental. That one, chef, and he really knew also how to twist something in you to really make you react.
Yeah, react in what way, say?
Well, for example, I was putting a lot of care in my sauce when I was making sauce, and he would taste the sauce and just look at me and say, you know what, you will never be able in your entire life to make a good sauce. I know that from now on. And I was like, things like that.
So what do you do when you're a young cook? You're incredibly intimidated. You've told me before that you felt on the verge of throwing up before going to work on Monday mornings because you were so terrified.
On the Sunday night, the entire team was so terrified to go back in that kitchen on Monday that starting at 5 p.m. we will start to have like a stomachache, and the stress will kick, and we wouldn't eat, and we wouldn't sleep all night, and some of the cooks will be sick when they arrive at the restaurant. We were so terrorized not to be able to produce the quality that we were supposed to produce, in quantity and in quality.
He's a little guy, isn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
so what did you learn you stayed on with at Jamais for 2 years? I believe.
3 years.
3 years.
I did 1 year, then I went to do my military duties, and then came back for 2 more years.
So you came back despite all that stress. What does he teach you about sauce? I mean, you're an extraordinary saucier now.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
It's true. What do you learn?
He was supposedly, at the time, and he was considered in Europe the best chef
of
the century worldwide, him and Girardet. And we all knew that the teaching was absolutely unique there. We all knew that it was no one else who would teach us whatever we were learning there. So we were making that sacrifice. And that really was, for us, the drive to stay with someone who was so abusive in that aspect.
Worth it in the end?
I'm sorry?
Worth it in the end?
Yes, because we learn, obviously, technique and a tremendous discipline. Technique, not only technique about making the sauce, but about keeping a kitchen clean, about how to, it was 25 cooks in a kitchen which was slightly bigger than that. How to move in a kitchen, how to work as a team, how to produce extremely precise food.
Yeah, I remember you telling me a story. You had to produce these miniature dots.
Yes, on the plate. Which, I mean, if you go to Atelier Joël Robuchon at the Four Seasons, they're doing it.
But they don't use a little squeeze bottle.
Now they use a little cornet.
You had to do it off.
At the time, it was a spoon, coffee spoon.
So that's just incredibly hard work when you've got all these covers coming out.
It was about practice and discipline, and you were kind of domesticating your movement, domesticating your hand. From the thought, you had to really, it was about 100 dots or 120 something dots. And you knew it was not 118 because it will be a gap in between the 119 and 120. So it was, either way, you can do it entirely or you couldn't.
Notice how little actual food he talks about when he talks about learning to cook. Tony, you had a widely different experience cooking.
Well, for me, when I started cooking, there really wasn't any tradition of there was no prestige attached to the business. It was a trade that attracted losers and people who fell into the business because no other business would have them, and it attracted, as it to some extent always has attracted, people who just don't feel comfortable out in the real world and found something accepting a refuge in that environment. It was still in those days very much sort of like cooking was an athletic event. The state of food as we knew it was appalling. So that was...
You're talking about what year?
72, 73. I suspect a lot of I'm sure Gabrielle and I have worked in similar type establishments, pretty much slap and serve, drawn butter, a little cayenne, or a little paprika, parsley, sprig, lemon wedge, and out. But it was all about speed. I mean, the chef was in many ways, the chef had the best, all the chef meant is he got better booze and better girls. He was in no way a disciplinarian. Discipline such as it was, well, you had to be fast. Speed was number one. You wanted to keep up, because if you didn't keep up, you looked like a punk in front of the other cooks. You felt bad. I mean, I was a very happy dishwasher for the first time in my life. I felt proud of myself. I had respect for other people. Where before entering the restaurant business, I'd had no respect for myself and no respect for anyone. I went home proud after a night working a dish station. I did a good job. The people I worked with felt I'd kept up my end. That felt good, and that same ethic continued as I moved up the line. I wanted to feel, I liked that feeling at the end of the night when the other cooks would slap you on the back and say, good job, you kept up. We drilled out 300 dinners, only 2 came back. The suckers are happy. It was very much an us versus them thinking. The whole learning to actually cook good food, learning to love food. To cook well with some real technique and some feeling for ingredients, that really came later. I was already in love with the subculture, in love with the people, and with the business. It wasn't like I was dreaming of truffles or anything like that from an early age. I found a warm, welcoming environment where I felt worth something. And that pressure that I largely put on myself was what kept me going. Later on in my life, I'm sure we'll talk about everybody at some point or another. It's a mentoring business. There are no secret recipes. The entire business is based on one person, whether it's a Joel Robuchon or whoever, some chef teaching a cook absolutely everything they know, determining that you're worth them taking that time to do that. And of course, I did have someone like that later in life, but for the first years, I wanted to keep up. I wanted to be one of the guys. I wanted to feel good when I went home about something.
Gabrielle, is that similar to your experience?
Kind of in the reverse. I feel like I learned to cook in the way that I have returned to when I was probably in the second grade. And I have a French mom who is very uptight and scolding and she's probably like the chef that you worked for. So, we weren't exactly kept under the, kitchen sink and made to sleep on a bed of towels, but practically. And so I learned a lot of how to eat very well and how to cook and how to get everything comestible out of an animal and how to clean the dishes and how to wipe up the counter and
As a young girl.
how to use it. Yeah, by the time I was in the second grade and we went to pumpkin carving, I had knife skills. I was using the knife this way. So I feel like that, then I got lost in 25 years of keeping up with this thing, and that sort of 120 dots, which I would never do now, and the dice and the brunoise and everything is, now I've just come full circle and don't do any of that, and I'm back to what I knew, which is sort of delicious, lusty, edible food that hardly requires a knife skill.
Well, you're obviously doing something right. It sounds like that you learned a love of food and what you said, to use all the animal, which is something that kids in America just didn't learn. We learned how to open a plastic package of salami.
That's true. No, we were the kids on the school bus with that stinking brown paper bag in the back of the bus with the sardine sandwich oozing into the stinky wedge of Morbier cheese, right? It's like, Mom, can't we have bologna? But no.
So at age 12 then, when you started as a dishwasher, did any of this translate? Did you bring any of this to the restaurant? That's not why you
No,
became...
and I've been trying to get out of this business ever since I was 12, so...
I'm not doing a very good job, are you?
Well, I finally came to love it eventually when I stopped trying to do something else. When I came home to what I really like to do, I began to really love it.
Was there a moment that this became clear that you needed, when suddenly you understood where you needed to be?
Yes, when I opened my restaurant, when I became the owner of my restaurant. I had gone to, I spent these 20-some years in kitchens, always...
What kind of kitchens?
Crappy. When he said parsley, I'm like, curly parsley.
Oh, yes, that has to be.
Not even flat leaf Italian parsley, and you just put more cheese on it to make it look good. And that's not entirely true. I've worked around in different places, but not so much restaurant. A lot of catering, that unique beast, where 50 people touch your food before, and it sits in the back of a van before you ever taste it. Unfortunately.
So it sounds like you...
Yeah, think about that. The sliding lamb chops, I love that. You're driving up to an expensive wedding, and the sheet pan's full of lamb chops sliding onto the floor. It's just
And the cater waiter.
the cater waiter's the finest
Sitting
and
on
service
top of the
person.
bucket of your soup.
Stop, you're making me homesick.
It sounds like what Tony said about everyone has a mentor. I've never met a talented chef who can't instantly say, here's the guy, without him I would not be who I am. It doesn't sound like you, did you have somebody like that?
I don't have that.
That's really remarkable that you didn't, and were able to learn how to run a restaurant in the hardest city in the world to run a restaurant.
Well, that was complete trial by fire, crash and burn, and painful for a lot of people. There's some people in my wake, that I've made some enemies because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And now I'm learning it, but this is the 7th year of my restaurant, and I can actually call myself a chef, I think, this year. I'm feeling it. No, I mean, as opposed to a cook. I've been a good cook for a long time, and now I think I actually know how to run a business. I know how to run a kitchen. I know how to take care of a staff. I know how to go to an event, be a participating chef in an event and have the right size portion and get it out on time. And it's a very different beast than just knowing how to cook something
That's a
tasty.
terrific point, especially now when the chef's job role is changing so rapidly. You have to be able to do all these things. We say anybody who can cook is a chef, but that's not really the case. A chef means leader, and that's what I think that you learn only after you've learned speed and technique, and then learned how to cook. Eric, your mentor and why, and try to define what made him a mentor and what were the qualities he gave you.
Well, I always consider myself having 3 mentors because it really taught me 3 different distinct things about the profession. Robuchon being obviously the first one and probably the most powerful one in my life. He had the biggest impact. And he really taught me, I was a beginner. Obviously, I had 2 years of experience plus 2 years of culinary school, but that was really, really the beginning of knowledge. And he really taught me how to make sauce, actually.
Well, for instance, I remember you'd have to make a whole new sauce for the dinner service after having done lunch
Yes.
service.
Well,
and you didn't always want to do that, did you?
We were doing the sauce, obviously, the morning for the lunch and at night for the night. And sometimes I was trying to get away with it, and I was keeping the sauce from the lunch for the night. And then he will test it and will say it's the sauce from the lunch. And I was I already had cameras. I was like, this guy has cameras. I wouldn't see the difference. And I was like, how can he know if I don't know? So he taught me, obviously, that. And I really learned, like I said before, how to domesticate my movements, which I think is very important. I think in cooking, if you want to cook something very refined, you have to be very precise. I'll give you an example. If you put a chunk of artichoke on a piece of fish, it may be very good, but if you cut it perfectly and you put the right amount of artichoke on that fish, that may trigger really and elevate the qualities of the fish. So I think it's very important for someone who wants to cook at the level where I am today, to have the knife skills from the beginning, to have the discipline, to learn how to really anticipate the way a sauce is going to evolve, because a lot of mistakes on the beginning when you learn how to make sauce is that you think, oh, it's a rosemary sauce, okay, so I put rosemary. But it's not like that. Rosemary infused exactly. Imagine yourself making tea at home and you let the tea infuse forever. And then you go at night and you test your tea. It's not the same as when you test the tea right after putting the herb or the chamomile or whatever it is. So I learned that from him. I learned really the technique that was really Joël Robuchon. And then I moved to Washington and I discovered someone that I adore and who was totally crazy, Jean-Louis Paladin. And for the ones who knew him, he was incredibly charismatic and a great artist. And from Jean-Louis, I kind of free myself from that kind of a Catholic school teaching. I kind of discovered rock and roll in a kitchen. And really, I needed it, obviously. When I was trying to create, I will always go back to what I learned in Robuchon. So my creations will be just a little twist on what he taught me. But I never really, I was not trained and motivated to create. Obviously, in the kitchen in Paris, I was trained to be one element of the team to be able to provide what he wanted. And then with Jean-Louis, I really, it really let me express myself on the artistic level, on the creative level. And I obviously made a lot of mistakes, but that was essential in my life as well.
And you were only able to do that, I imagine, because you'd learned this incredible technique first.
Yes, or I think I can be precise as much as I am today because of the previous teaching. And then when I went to Le Bernardin, Gilbert Lecoz really taught me how to obviously have respect for seafood and share a couple of tips and tricks. But I was already a trained cook when I went there. He really taught me how to become a leader in my kitchen, how to be an inspiration, how to run a restaurant and be able to pay the bills and have a profit at the end of the year, because we are not the Red Cross. At the end of the year, we need to make money. It's a way of living. And it taught me how to deal with the dining room. I didn't really dealt with it before. For me, it was a big deal because we took a vicious pleasure to burn the fingers of the waiters in a kitchen when I was in Paris, giving them very hot plates, and I'm sure you did that, Tony.
Me, no.
But I learned, I matured tremendously with him, and that was the end of the teaching with my mentors.
Tony, you've got one guy.
Well, actually, there was a cook early on when I was still working in Provincetown, at the fish houses, who I guess he liked cooking well for its own sake, and he was alone in that. I mean, it got him nothing. No one appreciated it. No one would have recognized good food if they saw it at that point. Certainly, his coworkers thought he was an oddball and weird for even attempting to do things right. They made fun of him because he had La Russe Gastronomique, and he would always go on, that's not the right way to make a béarnaise or an espagnole. I mean, a lot of these old style sauces. He loved those things.
How old was he?
Older than me at the time. He must have been in his late 20s.
And you would have been?
17, something like that. And I was impressed by that. His passion, his snobbery, and the fact that I recognized that his stuff tasted good, and it was creative, and it appealed to me, and it made me want to be like him. It made me want to go to culinary school, and I did largely because of him. But I guess the most strongest mentor in my life was Bigfoot, a restaurateur, not a chef, as he liked to constantly remind you, just a restaurant owner who was obsessive, compulsive, a real type A personality who liked to crawl inside your head, read your mind, learn how to manipulate you, absolutely controlled every aspect, physical and mental, in his environment. And he taught me what it meant to be responsible. He taught me what it meant that when you say you're going to do a thing, you do it. You showed up on time at Bigfoot restaurants. If you were due in at 8 o'clock, he wanted you in at 7:45. If you were in at 14 minutes of 8, you lost the shift, you went home. If you were late the next day, you were fired. That was it. Little things. He taught me that if, there was no, it's not my job. You were responsible, you were on the team, you were to do anything. And he also taught me how to get inside people's heads and totally screw with them, which are, really valuable. He bred intense loyalty. He knew how to buy you, not with money, but by giving you a break when you desperately needed one. He knew how to recognize in people who, had drug problems or money problems or were just complete, messes as human beings. People of bad character somehow.
No.
But waiters, managers, everyone. He would pluck people right out of the gutter and somehow motivate them to want to do well for him, and sort of people who could be trusted with his cash money and running his restaurants.
But you describe him, and when you first started describing him, he sounds like an evil, twisted individual. Getting inside.
This is the restaurant business, Michael. It's like we were watching, Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen, and the first episode, the evil Mike as I called him, maybe this manipulative, clearly psychotic, heavily tattooed, freakazoid with decent, cooking, technical skills. I'm thinking, that is chef's material. Manipulative. You have to be able to inspire loyalty, to recognize you have to be able to motivate people and build a team. And the rough material the raw material you're working with is, they're not exactly rolling out of MIT or the Marine Corps.
Right. And it's a hard business. They need to, you've got to find some way to motivate people who otherwise simply aren't motivated. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the kitchen.
You can't do it by constantly hitting them and abusing them, though. There is a place for ego destruction, for sure, for winnowing out people who are not going to do right by you or who are going to crack down the line. That's sort of a necessary function. I'm not suggesting throwing food at people or beating them, but at the end of the day, always you want someone who feels proud and happy that they're working for you when they go home. You don't want them going home feeling like fools for giving you their time, their loyalty, and their labor. And there were many times when I went home thinking, why am I working for this manipulative psychopath? When I was ready to crack, he'd always be there just at the right second with, Tony, here's some, you look like you need to see a Yankee game, and here's some tickets. Like, let me take you out to dinner. How's it going? A little pat on the back, a free T-shirt. Those things were, for whatever reason, it worked. Thanks for the T-shirt. Oh, thanks. Sunday brunch, no problem.
And you still get up at 6 o'clock every morning.
I still, Eric, who do you have nightmares about? When you have a horrible nightmare, chef nightmare, who's in that nightmare? In mine, it's Bigfoot saying, "Did you remember to turn off the fryer-later?" And I'm like, "Oh."
So, Gabrielle, you had nobody pushing you like this. How did you learn to push yourself? What were the forces that allowed you to create Prune?
Oh, I think I had that discipline early from my mom thing.
Really?
With that, so I think the striving to please and get the attention or affection of, I think if he had said to you at some point, "That's a good sauce," 3 years later, you would have finally, you sort of live for that one moment, and then you go through 5 more years of being told that you'll never make a good sauce again or something. So.
You tell a really funny story in the book, How I Learned to Cook, which all these chefs have contributed to. It's a great compendium of chef moments of young cooks learning this craft. And you really do start your real learning at Prune, opening up Prune. Can you tell a little bit about that story?
Sure. It's I think more appropriately is part of how I learned to be a chef, and versus how to cook. I was such an idiot. I would just, when I opened the restaurant in the beginning, I had this philosophy of, I can cook and you can cook, so why don't we just cook? And I had no program. So I would walk in the morning and just sort of change the menu and change the whole menu. And so on the story that I wrote about is a time where I had this bright idea that I would deep fry dried fava beans with, and serve it with this warm artichoke sort of barigoulle thing. And I thought, God, this sounds delicious. And I'm just gonna put it on the menu, and I've never tested it. And I had changed 10 other things that day. And other things got prepped first, and I didn't have time to test the artichoke fried fava bean fiasco, and until the first order came in. And it turns out that fava beans, which have been soaked in warm water, which was my bright idea to sort of soften them, I thought, oh, they'll have this starchy interior and they'll be crispy on the outside, this will be good. And I was just intuiting it. It turns out that they explode in fat. And they were like missiles flying through the kitchen, which is very funny and is also incredibly painful. And it was the most popular item on the new menu that night, so that was one on every ticket, and I had a sous chef who knew more than I did about how to run a kitchen, and it must have been just total anathema for her to have to experience this glib woman sort of pretending to run a restaurant who had a bright idea. And so no one lost an eye that night, but
Came pretty close.
like welts in the hairline.
But that's how you learn.
So now I know to test that on Friday before I run it on Monday.
Good lesson learned. Tony, a similar story to that of doing something when you were unprepared.
Well, I think how do you learn to cook? You learn by screwing up, by repetition, usually by painful experience. You learn by learning what not to do ever again, and how to prepare for even the remote possibility that might somehow happen on your watch, or that someone else might do something equally stupid. So I mean, there have been so many titanic screw-ups in my life, and the story in How I Learned to Cook I wrote about is how I learned to kind of not cook on television. If you've ever...
This is a whole different form of cooking. It's a new
It's
form
not
of
cooking.
that
It's
chefs
some
have to...
freakish, form of kabuki involving, involving knives and hot liquids, and you learn that, when you're doing first of all, these segments are 3 minutes long, and generally, these news studios at 7 o'clock in the morning, they have those happy, peppy news shows. So they're, encrusted with daisies and freakishly adorned, made-up people with fluffy hair. So they're drinking that coffee. No doubt they've told you beforehand that, our kitchen's really well-equipped. It's like a little Susie homemaker dollhouse. I got a hot plate, food encrusted, it stinks. Our chef, of course, is, happy to help you, some local burnout from the golf club. We can get you any food you want, if they have it, at the supermarket or the Quickie Mart at the corner. What's arugula? Can you use iceberg instead? No. Our hosts are really adventurous eaters, which apparently means they like mayonnaise with their curly fries. So when you show up for a few of these, you start to get real smart about what you got to do, because it's really not about the food. It's, I want to look cool for 3 minutes while I'm hawking the book, and I don't want to cut myself or anyone else, or spill hot oil on my genitals.
So what will you do then? Instead of a fava bean and an artichoke fried salad, you would do...
You try to do something like steaming mussels is really good, because you can do that in 3 minutes. I've learned that. I've been banging that gong for a long time now. Mussels, perfect. Steak tartare, not a good idea in like the vast open spaces between Chuck E. Cheese and Applebee's. Steak tartare at 8 o'clock in the morning, not good.
Really?
Yeah, especially hot on the mad cow story, it was not going over well. Projectile vomiting host, not good. I did steak. I write about doing steak poivre in an underventilated studio, which caused some panic, and apparently, a whole peppercorn caught in the teeth pre-breakfast can lead to comedy. But you learn to find safe, quick food that and when it's done, it looks like this. You learn to bring your own. You learn, just as in cooking anywhere else, when you're not in your comfort zone, assume the worst. Mm-hmm. Absolutely assume the worst and be prepared for it.
Eric, how do you cook when you have to do a TV demo? Do you have your staple?
No, I try to. I train at the restaurant first.
Do you?
Yeah, to see the timing.
It's good. You've learned already.
And then obviously I have something ready in case.
Do you?
One or two. One on the table over there at the end, and one underneath.
There's a box of Gordon's fish sticks, in the back.
Yeah, something like that. But I always start on the left, and I end up on the right, and I progress, and I end up there.
Very methodical, very meticulous, even there.
But like Tony, I learned the hard way too. On the beginning, I was going to, first of all, my English was even worse, and I wouldn't even understand the question. And they will say thank you, goodbye, and I will be like trying to
finish the dish.
Start the dish.
Gabrielle, have you done cooking on television, and how do you handle it? It's an unreal form of cooking.
Yeah, you have to be very prepared, and I did Martha Stewart a couple times, and that was pretty intense. Don't look at me, she kept saying, and I was like, okay, I won't look at you. I kept trying not to make eye contact, but it's unnatural to not speak.
Look at somebody.
And then I just did a thing at Gourmet yesterday, and none of the burners worked. So this is my caramelized, my sugar burning, and I was like, please burn. I wanted the sugar to burn, and I couldn't get there. So you get, that's right, you always have a swap out. It's television talk, right? We all know it now. You have your finished product.
But you all have to be able to do it, don't you? You don't say no to these requests.
Well, it depends.
Right.
But for the most part, it's part of selling a book. When you have a cookbook come out, people want you out there. People want to see you.
Eric and I have had this conversation many
turns
times
them
when
down.
he's saying, this is an undignified, I really don't think I should do it. And I said, but Eric, you owe your restaurant. It's not just you, that you're doing this demeaning thing for, appearing on these terrible programs. It's all of your loyal cooks who are looking to move up in the world. It's the bottom line of your restaurant. It's for the people who believe in you, who, you've got to do that. He bought that for a while, too.
Actually, I did. Usually, I avoid all those 5 a.m. shows.
Yeah, it can be scary. If you've ever seen Al Roker up close.
But that's not untrue that your staff loves it. One staff loves it.
Mm-hmm.
They need it for some reason. It's like, oh, you were on TV today. They get really,
It makes a difference,
it makes
too.
them feel glad that they're working in a restaurant that's in the press or something,
And that's no small thing.
I guess.
Hence the expression, taking one for the team.
Leader.
You've talked a lot about repetition and speed and the need to know what's going to happen before you intend to serve it. How about food and learning food? Food has something to do with this, and learning about food, how to cook. Tony, when did you first feel like you had the ability to put food together that was halfway decent and felt good about it?
I think it's learning how to eat first. You learn what gives you pleasure, what feels right, and you try to get that. You try to reproduce that, or find a way to prepare something that speaks to your soul in some way, I guess.
Sort of mysterious.
It is mysterious because I spent a lot of years floundering around, using a lot of techniques and book knowledge that I learned in school to often painful, disastrous, and comical effect. I should not have been doing a lot of the food that I was doing. I shouldn't have. I never should. The squeeze bottle and I should never have met. I did many terrible things in the name of large plates and tall food and squeeze bottles and microgreens. I shouldn't be messing with that. Fusion, not something I should have ever, I feel sorry for anyone who ever ate one of my spring rolls. But, you find what you're good at. And what I'm good at is old school, working class French classical bistro fare. I've never ever pushed the envelope in any sense. I don't think I can think of almost no original dishes that I've done that have changed the landscape in any small way. I make a good beef bourguignon, and I make a cassoulet that tastes right. I guess because I like that stuff and always liked it, and it's probably what I should have been cooking all along. So I guess but learning to eat and learning what's good at learning not only what gives you pleasure, but others is probably a good place to start.
How about you, Eric?
Well, I went into cooking because I love how to eat. I was a real gourmet at a very early age, and I was hanging in the kitchen with my mother and with my grandmothers all the time, just to eat. And at home we were eating lunch and dinner, a 3-course meal with good wine and a table set, exactly like in a restaurant. And I had great pleasure in eating, and kind of obsessed as a child with food, and I was eating all the time. And I will even ask my mother or whoever was around to bake an apple tart for after school, and I will eat the apple tart every day, huge like that, and then I will have my dinner. And being a very bad student in school, at age 15 in France, you have to decide where you're going, a professional college or professional school, or actually college, or nothing. And right away I said, oh, I want to become a chef. Not like I knew a lot of techniques about cooking or I was good in cooking, but I just wanted to be a chef so I will be able to eat. And actually I wanted to be a pastry chef because I was eating all those cookies and chocolates and cakes, and finally by miracle I ended up in a culinary school, and I learned that it was really a tough world. To be already in school was tough. Mm-hmm. We had those old-time professors who were coming from Le France, the big boat, the cruise boat Le France, very old-fashioned Escoffier style, and I was like, wow, this is tough here. I realized right away that I didn't like pastry. I just liked to eat it. And then...
Why didn't you like pastry?
Sugar and chocolate is sticky. I don't like that.
All of you, I know, have been through really hard kitchens. One of the things that I always wonder is why do you stay? I mean, you went through hellish situations. Why did you stick it out? Why did you stay? There were any number of things you could have done.
Well, I really, after the school and after graduation and all the trainings I did and working in La Tour d'Argent, and then La Tour d'Argent was a game for me. I was 17 years old. I was like kind of laughing. It was like, the professor and the kids playing and doing jokes, and it was more a game than anything else. But Robuchon, the game stopped. Yeah. And thank God I really was passionate at that point already. And I knew I had to go through that. I didn't really know, because you never really know, but my instinct was like, stay with this guy because you're going to be able to do something. And that was the only drive that I had to stay there, because I really hated
the experience.
The experience was not pleasant at all.
Yeah.
For me, it was in the lower moments. It was just sheer pride. My whole self-image was tied up in whether I did well, whether I could survive this. If I couldn't, then I was no one. I was worthless. And I liked feeling good at the end of the night, and to not have that in my life was unthinkable. And there were the fringe benefits, the camaraderie in a restaurant, not just in the kitchen, but with the floor, the bartenders, all of the people who work in the business is really intense. Mm-hmm. And the feeling of being part of something, especially this group that gets out at 2 o'clock in the morning and parties together and has this very insular lifestyle that's so different than normal people. No matter how tough things were, no matter how hard or degraded or abused or underpaid or any of those things, we felt like an elite to some extent. Mm-hmm. And that kept me, that and the free liquor kept me going.
Gabrielle, why did you stay in this profession?
I actually felt trapped like a rat for the longest time. So it wasn't, this is what I knew how to do. I knew how to clean up. And the better you get at something, and then the older you get, it becomes more fearful to become amateur again at something. So I didn't want to, and you get higher paid the more you go along. So I think to jump ship and go do something else after I had already accrued this experience and this rate of pay and this comfort, and it became, I didn't want to get out. This is where I wanted to stay. And it's only in the last years that I've really embraced it, and I find it so honest, this work, in a way.
Interesting. What do you mean?
Sometimes I talk to people about their jobs, and I don't understand what they're doing, particularly sort of money jobs. Like, they sort of go to an office, I think, and talk on the phone, and I think money flies around. but they never touch it or see it. And if you are drawn to this industry, then you are sort of anal compulsive and a little freakish, and you have some, weird things going on. So you like to sort of cross the list off all day long and be ready by 6 o'clock. And then it's incredibly gratifying to have your walk-in all neatly labeled and dated, and you just go home and you're tired and you've made people incredibly happy, which, for better or for worse, that's one way of making people happy, by cooking them a meal.
I think it's a great way of making people happy.
I guess so. I mean, sometimes I think all I do is cook for rich people, but not always. Sometimes it feels very gratifying, and it's good work. I have to say, it's very good work. And I'm thinking a lot about the crop that's coming up into this industry now, who I am encountering constantly through cooking schools, who they come for externships, and they know very well that they can do something else in the world, and it's a very different feeling. It's not, they don't feel trapped at all. It's a choice. And are you having this experience at all? It's sort of.
Is this a good or bad thing? Because there are a lot of people are getting into cooking without really knowing how difficult it actually is, but they're starstruck by the.
Yeah, I think I'm untangling whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's very, the culinary student is very savvy now. He or she knows to sort of put the head down and do the work. But the yes is like this, sure.
Not yes, chef.
I need you to chop this stuff into this, sure. Like, was that clipped?
Really?
And then,
Send them to us in a couple of weeks.
Eric, can you imagine what would have happened if you'd done that to Robichon?
right.
No.
You would have been hurt,
Well,
physically hurt.
could be.
I mean,
The only answer was yes, chef.
Yes, chef.
right,
But
there's no back
not
sense.
like yes, chef. It was yes, chef. I mean, it's louder.
Yeah. So you agree?
Well, I think actually the kids rolling out of culinary schools now, and the kids I see cooking, come to readings on the road, and I eat
You
in
must
my
see a lot
restaurants.
of that. Yeah.
I think there's so many more people who want to cook now, and they're better educated and they're better trained. I think in aggregate, however, the same percentage of knuckleheads are going to wash out as did back in my day when they were all house painters or ex-cons. You get X amount of people come in, 80% of them are not going to make it. That said, you're getting a better 20% at the end of the day. No question about it. I mean, I've met a lot of really highly motivated young kids out there who, have really impressed me.
But tying into what to eat and having a sense of food, that I am finding more and more absent. There's a desire to cook or work in a restaurant, but people have I'm making a large generalization, I know, which I never do, that they don't have visceral growing up experiences with food. I get probably 2 letters a week from mostly young female aspiring cooks who want to come cook with me because they want to learn how to cook. And I think you're not going to learn how to cook in my kitchen, because what we do here is we do restaurant cooking, and I think what they want is the grandmother and the mother and the beef stew on the back burner slowly cooking, and this is how we make biscuits without a recipe, and it's not happening.
But you do serve that kind of food. You serve very comforting, traditional.
Yes, but I'm also saying, and can you do this in 10 minutes, and it has to be done, and it gets wrapped up, and it's not at the mother's apron strings, but I think they think, well, you're female, and you cook, so
it still
I want to learn
remains-
how to cook. It's this...
It's romanticized still in their minds.
You know that look when their hopes and dreams die? See that? We've seen that so many times. It's sad. And a lot of times that's why you push them early, because you'd rather see that look sooner rather than a month from now when you've invested a lot of time that you don't have teaching them, and then that busy Saturday night when they get the message, I
Yeah.
don't really want to do this. It hurts. People are mean to me. I smell bad at the end of the night. Not good.
And then you throw family meal their way, like, okay, here's an opportunity for you to cook. You're dying to cook and bust out, so do family meal. And it doesn't come.
No, what, they don't like to do it because they don't like the...
Oh, no. I think they lug the opportunity, but that's where you most see that they don't have any innate food experience. They cook something that they saw on television or learned, like a facsimile. Does that make
They
sense?
don't know how to eat. They've never
Possibly.
eaten real food, or they just don't. They don't.
And here we are saying they, and it's not, there's.
So some cooks don't know how to bring soul into their food. That's what it is.
Last question about this. Are you finding the same? You see a lot of people want to come extern at Le Bernardin. You get a lot of young cooks wanting to cook for you. What are you seeing coming out of the ranks now?
Well, we see, most of the cooks who come to Le Bernardin have already an experience.
You get a high caliber to begin with. They already know.
Well, they recommended by a chef that we know, or they have been to school and they start at a very easy level of cooking. What the difference in between what I see today in the kitchen, in our kitchen, and the kitchen where I grew up in the 80s, is that it's a lot of smart people coming into the kitchen, and also people coming from a different background. We see people who thought they would love to be a lawyer, or they would love to be in finance, and then suddenly they decide that's not for me. I want to go cooking, and they stop everything and they go to culinary school, or they go to a small restaurant to begin. And if they survive that, then they try to come to us.
And then you break them on the wheel.
You must, especially if they come from a corporate culture where the rules are considerably different than they are in a professional kitchen. There must be it must be a hard adjustment for some.
For them, it's really hard because they come from a very civilized world. And we try to be as civilized as we can. But still, it's not the same as being at the office.
You mentioned something really interesting. There's no lying in the kitchen. That's something that doesn't translate from any other. You can lie in just about every other business.
That's exactly
you
right.
cannot lie in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's true too.
About anything.
That's what you were talking about, the honesty, and that's what I've noticed in all the best kitchens. You're either ready or not. You're either a mess or you're not.
You can cook an omelet or you can't. It's just that simple.
Right. And there are few professions in which that's true. You cannot bullshit.
Yeah.
About anything.
The dish speaks for itself. You cannot explain how great is your dish.
Right.
You cannot say, I put that here and that, and isn't it great?
Right.
It's the person who's eating the dish knows if it's great or not.
But
and
also,
that is when you cannot lie any longer.
You can't lie about yourself. And even your private life, you can't. You spend too much time in such close quarters with the same people day after day after day, so that there is just no kind of pretense allowed. I mean, no one could keep up a false front under such circumstances over time, which I think is really refreshing.
It's bracing and unusual to be in that kind of environment because it's so rare in contemporary society. A question from Berkshire South. This presentation is being broadcast via satellite. Asks a question that's apropos. What advice would you give a young culinary student headed to the CIA to make the most of their time there? Is the investment worth it?
I always say work in a restaurant. I mean, I hope that they have worked in the real world of restaurants in a lowly capacity for a few months before they invest the money.
Why is that?
To find out now rather than later whether they really want to be in the restaurant business. If after a few months getting their ass kicked in a busy restaurant, as a dishwasher or as a prep cook, they still want to be in the restaurant business, and I think CIA is a really, really good, a smart way to go. It'll be very advantageous to them later on.
CIA is a great school. What I have seen sometimes, the mistake that some students make is that they're going to invest, I think it's about $30,000 to go to CIA, and they invest $30,000, and sometimes they look for the return. So they don't understand why they put $30,000, and then they go into a kitchen after that, and they're being paid $6 an hour. That it's, if you go for the money, obviously you shouldn't be in our industry.
Right.
Which, if you have $30,000, I think you should get 3 roommates and move in Brooklyn and get a job somewhere for 2 years and live that way. Like, you could get an experience also. As she here.
Is it worth it? I mean, there are other ways of learning. I mean, you can work in the field. Should they go to school
It helps.
now? Because
You can.
it's so competitive.
Listen, it's not the
there's
only way to become a chef by any means, but it helps. Anything that gives you, this is a very competitive business. A lot of people want to be chefs now. Anything that gives you an edge and at least, you know.
Do you look for it on resumes that pass in front of you?
Me, no, I wouldn't hire anyone from there.
It's required.
To
you.
go to CIA? No,
To have
not to have a culinary
culinary
experience.
education?
No, sometimes we have cooks who have been referred by other chefs, and sometimes we promote also in-house some dishwashers, so people
Right.
in a cleaning crew, and they come to us and they're like, you know, I would like to learn how to cook, and if it's a potential, we promote them.
They should know that chefs like me would almost always prefer to promote from within the ranks, even from dishwashing station or cleaning station, because, you know, I know who's doing that. I know something about them, their character, my dishwasher, someone who's been with me for a while, whereas I don't know anything about you other than that you think you're smart and have got an education. And that, you know, that's kind of a stroke count against you.
And if
in
your
my-
dishes
in
are
my
clean,
particular-
you can presume that your lettuce leaves are going to be clean, and then you can presume that the plate's going to be clean by the time they're moving up to protein, or
Because it's all really the same thing.
they share some qualities:
What is Tom? Where does
speed, efficiency, economy,
Right.
accuracy.
But Thomas Keller once told me there was, if your oil bottle is not clean, then your plate's not going to be clean and your food's going to be no good. So where you start is by having a clean oil bottle. You start at the beginning. Gabrielle, these are some questions from the audience. What advice would you give to someone who would like to open his own restaurant? You having done it by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, and I think, what's the statistic that 80% go down in the first 5 years?
You knew that starting out.
I did, and I expected to be part of that statistic. Advice: I think that you should have a very strong point of view. Don't open someone else's restaurant. Don't open a copy of someone else's restaurant. And don't pass off, don't make excuses for anything. I think that if you can take total responsibility for every single thing that goes wrong in your kitchen, it'll help you out a lot. Everything.
That's a hard thing to, people, young culinary students seem less and less willing to take responsibility for.
People in the world seem less and
That's
less willing to take responsibility or to admit they're wrong or to,
Right.
they want to pass it off.
A question for Tony. Tony, you will eat anything, but not all of us can. What advice would you give to adventurous eaters who want to come home from places like, say, China, with their intestines intact?
And it's just about, I mean, food in China is so great. If the locals like it and if the locals are eating it with enthusiasm and in great number, chances are they're good at it. It might seem ooky to you initially, but man, they've been cooking for thousands of years longer than us. You know, if there's anyone who can make a chicken foot or a duck tongue good, it's the Chinese. And for me, that's the great, I think in the heart of every great cook, there's a Chinese guy. I don't care whether you're French or Italian. So of all places, to use China as an example, man, you're going to eat almost nothing but fantastically well there. What's the worst thing that could happen, you know?
So your advice is
Eat.
learn to eat it.
Yeah, give it a shot, eat it, you know, bring some, you know,
Imodium ID.
Imodium, yeah. Traveling chef's best friend. Don't eat at the hotel buffet. You know, for God's sake, if you're getting sick in China, it's at the Sheraton breakfast buffet every time. I'll tell you this from, you know, if I've learned anything in 5 years, that's going to kill you.
It's because food's been sitting around there at, you know, at 90-degree temperatures for hours and hours.
Right. The crowded local place with the the dogs and cats running around on the floor and the soot on the walls, and I don't even know what it is in the wok. If there's 10 people waiting online, they're from Shanghai or Beijing, that place isn't staying open by poisoning people. They're staying open because it's good.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think that's the way chefs eat, and I think that's the way you learn to cook, is travel and eat.
Eating where the
travel and
locals
eat.
Yeah. Eric, obviously you cannot beat your cooks, like as you were. How do you motivate them? It is a different climate now. Kitchens are a little bit more professional. There are, you do have to be more careful in today's society. You have to train cooks and motivate cooks in a way that you weren't. How do you do it?
Well, what we have created, it's a circuit inside our kitchen, and if you really want to learn everything, it takes about 3 years. So for someone who's really at the
To learn all the stations you're talking
to
about?
learn all the stations, and so every few months we move the cooks and they learn something else, and to become a sous chef it's 3 years, and then after that they need 2 more years at least if they want to be able to take care of a kitchen at our level. But we make sure that they always have something to look up to. You say that? Yeah. We always make sure that they have something that they're going to learn, and it's not going to be, they always see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like they're doing canapé for 3 years in a row or peeling potatoes. By doing that, we keep them on board, and we motivate them to, if they're excellent in one station, they're moving to the next. If they really do not perform properly, they're not moving. So that, I think, is a great motivation for them to be able to see what's going to happen in the next station.
Right, because the work of a cook is incredibly monotonous. You spend all day peeling potatoes.
Factory work.
It is. It's not glamorous at all, and you've got to have a huge capacity for mind-numbing work.
It's all about repetition.
all
It's
about
all go fine and good to cook a perfect plate of fish, but you have to do the same thing every time I go to Le Bourdain. If I've had a really good dish there, I come back in a few weeks, I expect it to be exactly the same. And what that requires is for whoever is cooking that to do it perfectly
Right.
the same again and again and again and again, and that's the way it's got to be.
It's the only way it can happen. So you motivate people by moving around, by
Yes.
keeping them, and they see other people moving around. They say, I want to work that station. Do you have a problem with that motivation? You've got such a small kitchen. I would think that it's a whole different environment than Le Bourdain.
It depends on the crop of cooks we have at the time. I think we sometimes we get cooks who are at the end of their, they've been in high-end kitchens and they've gone through the rigors and they want to, it's sort of like the SPCA of kitchens. So they come with their bruised shoulders and they're ready to they're hardworking, they don't need to be beaten down anymore, they already have it in them, and they just want to cook in a nice place with some good food and good ingredients and a paycheck. And the bringing ones up who haven't been through it, how do you motivate them? Free alcohol.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Cute girls and boys. I don't know. You sort of keep the atmosphere entertaining or something.
But it's important because turnover of your staff is a big pain in the ass for you guys. It's hard. You want to avoid that.
Yeah, I think you should interview properly. I think for me to motivate people is not my job, and I have too many other things to do. It's like you're either interested in this stuff and you have a work ethic, or you don't. So get in or get out, but don't waste my time. And you reward people who do good work. So is that motivation?
Rewarding good work, yeah.
Yeah.
I would hope that's
Say you did a great job, and
Yeah. And when you do a great job, I don't think anything feels better in such a difficult situation. To have the chef say, you did a really nice job tonight, goes a long way. A lot of questions are curious about you guys and what you eat and what your favorite restaurants are and things like that, and I know you get that a lot. I am curious about, what a lot of people are curious about, reviews, their importance. One of the audience would like to know, do you ever learn to spot Ruth Reichel in disguise? Or is Frank Bruni, for that matter? Is it important? Does it matter? And how much attention do you pay to that kind of thing? Because the press is influential, especially in New York City.
It depends. For him, it's important.
Right.
For Leal, probably not so important. For other restaurants I've worked in, I worked in one place that the entire opening month, we had a maitre d' whose job was, he wasn't even a maitre d', he was one of the partners. His job was to stand in that dining room, lunch and dinner, every single day, because he could recognize Ruth.
Really? Well,
It's a job.
could they do anything more? Once they recognize?
Yes and no.
Well, they don't like to see extra courses, and generally they don't want the special treatment. The challenge then is to give them special treatment without them knowing that they're getting special treatment.
How important is it to you, Eric?
No, it is important because a bad review in a very powerful newspaper or a very powerful magazine will definitely have an impact, an economical impact on the restaurant. If Ruth Reichel comes to Le Bernardin and writes in a when she was at the New York Times a week later that it's really terrible and nobody should go there, she has an audience, she has a power, and it means that you're not going to be able to survive sometimes.
At the level you're cooking and serving food.
Yeah, I think so. And but if we recognize Ruth Reichel or any food critic or not, of course we can bring a little bit more attention, but almost everything is done. When it's 1 o'clock, if the base of the sauce is not good, if you burned it, or if it's over-salted, or if it's, what are you going to do with you don't have time to redo everything at the last minute.
I can get away with a bad order now and again. At Eric's level, at
Right.
any of those restaurants, the working assumption has to be that one bad plate, regardless who would go, that's the end of the world. That is theoretical. That could be the one that brings us down. And which explains, the chefs who were, maniacal and driven, and the rages and stuff like that. That's fear as much as anything else. What is the chef nightmare? It's losing control. That's I think what we all are terrified of losing control of all those million little things.
How about you, Gabrielle? Critics?
I don't
Don't
read
care.
them. We don't do them. I have a 30-seat restaurant. We are the Red Cross. We don't make any money anyway, so it's sort of, if we lost business, it wouldn't matter. We don't make any money, so it doesn't matter. And I am the harshest critic in our place, and I eat dinner there frequently, and I already admit everything we do wrong, so it's sort of, you can't get me because I already know how bad we are.
Tony, there's a number of questions for you, of course, about your work after the kitchen and what you're doing now. Tony, I love your travel show. How did the idea come about for it? And if you could talk about what your motivations are, what you're doing, why you love it so much. And there's also somebody who wants to know if you're going back to Beirut soon, or will you visit Iraq?
Iraq, no. Beirut, as soon as possible. Why do I do it? Because I can. This is very simple. I put down a very nice score with Kitchen Confidential, and people were willing to let me travel and eat and have fun and drink and write about it. And then after that, other people were willing to give me money to go travel and eat and drink too much and talk about it on television. And slowly the tail started to wag the dog, and then I fell in with a group of filmmakers who we became very close as we made these shows. And we started. It's like being an NYU film student's dream. We get to go out on the road and misbehave and drink a lot and come up with high concept shows. I choose where we go. Who wouldn't do what I do? I have the best job in the world. So it wasn't any calculated thing, because no reasonable person would let me do that. So I'm just doing it because I can get away with it, and I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can until they get wise.
Well,
I'm having fun. It's really all about me,
what are some of the upcoming places that you want to visit?
Going to Shanghai in a couple of weeks, Hong Kong, Sao Paulo, Tuscany.
How do you choose a place? It's just
Saw a movie, looked cool. Friend said, Rio, awesome. Okay. Read a book that made it sound gorgeous and interesting to me. Or liked the food, have a friend there, went there on book tour, had a great time, and then decided to go back. Have an opinion about the place. Vegas, we have a friend who, with a connection in Vegas, and thought, well, we could just go make really self-indulgent TV there and have a good time while we're doing it. Any variety of motivation.
yeah. So that's one thing. It's great to just go there, but you've actually got to structure a show. How do you figure out how do you make a show out of a place? Is there a way that you go about this, or you just go there?
Alcohol is involved in most of our
Well, we know that.
creative decisions. We rip off films that we love. We think, wow, it's a New York show. Remember that film Taxi Driver? It looked really cool. So we sit around and with the editors and with the producers, and we all like each other. We're very close. It's kind of like a band. You rehearse in a cellar, and something comes out the other end. We shoot a lot of footage, and we shoot like 60 hours of footage, and that at the end of the day, hopefully we have 42 minutes of reasonably coherent stuff. But it's fun. It is kind of like making a meal in that there are all of these elements, and you kind of reduce them and trim them and cut them into little pieces, and then you build something over time using a lot of different elements. And by the time you play, when you play with the music and the sound, and you realize how that can affect a scene, and how powerful a tool editing is, and lay on voiceover, write voiceover. It's fun. It's fun.
It looks like you're having fun there. One of the members of the audience asked about your Jersey show. I'm from the Jersey Shore, and I loved your Asbury Park episode. What was your most memorable food experience there, besides the grilled cheese?
That was pretty much it.
Is that with Mar-
That town. That's bleak. That town is pretty bleak. I'm very sentimental about my time on the Jersey Shore, but that's like when I was there in the winter. That was a moonscape, and it was the Howard Johnsons of Time Forgot, and that. I don't think Howard Johnson's had any clue that these guys were still operating. It looked like a crack house, and they had two things on the menu: grilled cheese sandwich and a burger. And there was no way I was eating the burger.
Funny. It's too bad. This is a sad thing.
What are you telling me? I miss the saltwater taffy, the fried clams, or a few towns over. There's great stuff.
So why did you do that show in this wasteland?
Because I spent happy childhood in similar communities down there. Asbury Park looked like a wonderland to me when I was a kid. I liked seedy amusement parks and amusement arcades and unsupervised activity on the beach, and that was all fun. And I grew up in New Jersey, and I wanted to kind of check it out, and plus we wanted to rip off the opening scene from The Sopranos, and that's exactly how we kind of come up with shows.
So you're gonna keep doing TV as long as they'll let you.
If they suddenly come at me and say, we want nothing, we want you to do, Tony's, barbecue Odyssey, obviously, no.
But you like the format that you're working in now, and
I like the format of they let me do whatever the hell I want. Yeah, I like that format. Not giving a shit is a really fantastic business model for television.
served you well. Though you'd caution young culinary students about that.
Yeah. You mean the cautionary tale of Rocco Spirito? Is that what we're alluding to? They teach that in school.
It is. Yeah, I think Rocco's a really sad story, and I think a lot of chefs feel bad for him. He seemed to me, he seemed to want celebrity more than he wanted to cook, more than he wanted to do. Gabrielle?
You think?
But it's a style.
And he's such a good cook.
He's such
and he's
a good
such a
cook.
great
That's
guy.
why it's such a great tragedy, I think.
Really
The
good
guy is really a good
Very
cook.
talented.
So what happened?
You know, television. The bitch goddess. She will destroy you in the end if you're not, you know, if you care. And he cared.
Yeah.
His MTV comeback, video, Where Are They Now, is going to be excellent when he's got
yeah.
his 12 seats, his little atelier, and Rocco comes back and cooks good food and gets,
You think that'll
after
happen?
he goes to rehab.
I think he's going on the real world with, like, you know, Mini Me and
Right.
chick wrestler. Surreal life, you know.
I don't know. Do you think he can make his way back into the kitchen? I mean, who knows?
Sure, anyone can.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I spent some time at the CIA not too long ago, and a number of the chefs remarked on the fact that a lot of the kids were there because they wanted to be TV stars. So I think Rock is a great cautionary tale in terms of why you go into cooking or why you don't go into cooking. What advice do you have to kids coming into this profession who really want to be
Doesn't it
cooks?
remind you of people that say, I want to be a rock star instead of I want to be a musician, or I want to be on TV instead of I want to cook? It's
Right.
do you want the lifestyle, or do you just live music, or there's a disconnect between the activity and identity? Is that?
I mean, I think the same rules apply. You know, I want to be an actor, or I want to be, you know, a star chef.
Right.
I mean, you know, the overwhelming likelihood is that you're going to end up on a shag carpet with Ron Jeremy.
Eric,
Yeah, I'm cautious. I have a restaurant.
what's your advice to young kids in
I think
culinary
you-
school, learning to cook?
You have to have the passion for what you do, and actually, if you're an actor and you're passionate to become a movie star, you're missing the point. You have to be passionate about acting. If you're into cooking, you have to be passionate about cooking, not about being a chef celebrity on TV or anywhere. And I think that you better to really focus and know if you have the passion or not, because it's too painful to be in our industry if you don't have the passion.
In this industry particularly, which is all about taking care of other people, and if you're interested in being a celebrity, it's all about you. So you're looking the wrong direction. You are here to serve people, to take their coats, to clean up their dishes, to accommodate their allergies, things like that. So you have to be very servile in a way.
It's a service business.
For me.
That's what it's all about. Well, those are very good words, all of you. And important ones in terms of this, in terms of the changing culture of the celebrity chef and the nature of eating dinner in America. It's changing things. One of the great things about being a chef, I think one of the most important things about being a chef now, you guys have voices. You can teach America how to eat and how to choose right. It's been a sort of tragedy what we've done to the food supply here and how we've learned to eat. Do you guys consciously think about, I know Tony does, because you've been very outspoken about certain food issues. Do you guys as chefs, do you feel like you have the opportunity to speak out and help educate people about what's good and what's bad about eating and how to eat and how to care about the food that we have and care about the earth?
Yeah, we have the opportunity, but I care more about cooking at the restaurant than taking that opportunity to teach people. I mean, I'm not giving conferences, so I'm not. I mean, actually, today, yes. But nobody asked me. No, but really, I think it's a revolution in this country, and restaurants have a lot to do with it, and chefs have a lot of things to say to the public, to educate. Even TV Food Network, as horrible as it is, sometimes creates an interest on food, where people sometimes didn't have any interest. So I think it's moving in the right direction.
I mean, I think anything that creates more options and higher expectations and alternatives is a positive thing for food. Anything that restricts those options is a bad thing. Obviously, I'm not fond of people who would want to take our foie gras away, or for reasons of cruelty or purported cruelty. I'm not fond of the notion that the government owes you a 100% guarantee of safety or cleanliness. I'm frightened when I hear the word purity too often in a sentence. Often the sound of jackboots follows that kind of talk. It's all, it's about pleasure first for the chef, I think. I think it's very nice. I think it's a good thing that expectations have raised, that you find better things in markets. I'm all for organic food, the slow food movement, heritage breeds. I think those are nice alternatives. Don't tell me to use them, or that I should use them, or that I have to, or that the world will, that it's evil not to. But I agree with Eric. I think that it's become a chef-driven thing. The first time in history. Another positive effect of this whole celebrity chef thing is that for the first time, chefs are empowered to determine what the customer is going to eat next year to a great extent, and that's working out okay.
You agree, Gabrielle?
I'm thinking about it a little bit.
I think it's a great thing. I think you're right, Tony. It's changing the way people think about food, and it's changing the way grocery stores are stocked, and how food is grown. There are more naturally grown hogs now because of chefs selling Berkshire hogs.
Yeah, I may find Jamie Oliver unwatchable, but if you look at markets, supermarkets in Britain now, post Jamie, compared to the way they were pre-Jamie, I mean, they're better. There's better stuff and more variety. So that's undeniable.
Yeah. So a hopeful time in
It's a constant struggle between good and evil, I think. I tend to look at these things in apocalyptic. For every prune, Whole Foods is yanking, worrying about the mollusks in the tank at,
Right.
At Whole Foods.
Yeah.
For every positive stride, there seems to be someone on the other hand who wants to take our foie gras away or work for Applebee's.
You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so